Hi everyone, George here, the editor of the Sales Transformation Podcast. This week on the show, we've got the second part of Phil's conversation with Frank Cespedes. So if you haven't listened to the first part yet, I'd recommend you go back to last week's show and listen to that first. If you're all caught up already, then all that's left for me to say is enjoy the episode.
So we've been talking about sort of sales models, and then we're talking about territory management, a little bit about account management as what are the best strategies for those? One of the things that the last comment about sales models, which I found very interesting from your book, was about sort of really understanding the buying, you've talked about this a bit already, but the buying process for the different products and services that you provide. And it made quite an impact on me, because even, sort of in our business, and it maybe I'm showing up how unstrategic we are, Frank, when I share this with you. But you can get very excited about developing a new product and service. Yeah. But what you don't realize when you develop this new product and service is that the buying process for that new product and service is completely different.
Right.
And the personas that you need to sell to for that, and you talked about subscription as a service, different sort of models in here. And all of a sudden, yes, you've created a sexy new sort of development to your products and service offering, but you then realize actually the market that you need to sell that to is completely different to the personas who are buying, your traditional product and service. I don't know what you would call that, sort of product and service creep. I don't know, meaning, they're like scope creeps, but, for us, it's been a big wake up call to say, yeah, we've very excited about this new solution that we've actually developed, but we've got a long way to go before we're able to get that to market in a proper way, because we simply have not got the right personas in place. We haven't defined, the buying side well enough. I don't know whether some of your board, when they start to launch new ideas, whether they have really thought through the sales model in a really diligent way.
Well, I mean, just a couple of things. First of all, I think that change, what I'd call that domino effect, it's not just new products. It could be a new pricing approach. We've lived through this in the last 15 years in software. When you go, think about ERP software. When you move from selling, the way Oracle and SAP did for decades, 5, 6, 7-year licensing contracts, that was a capital expenditure decision.
Yeah.
When it moves to the cloud, it's now an operating expense decision at customers. Those are different buyers.
Absolutely.
Right? And A, the beginning of wisdom is understanding that. And then B, I don't think this is a mystery or metaphysics. You then say, where are our established relationships? Where do we need to go? And by the way, how do we reframe our value proposition for these new buyers who are concerned about different things? And again, this is a constant. This is what change means. But, what can I say, Phil? We chose this life. That's the way it works.
It's exciting, Frank. It's an exciting life. Can I just, that I keep on thinking of questions I want to ask, but in your book, you talk about the trillions that are invested in working capital that is affected by the sales cycle. And, the route to cash, you talked about it earlier on, actually, you mentioned it earlier on, but I found the figures were quite staggering, but so important. This at the end of the day, it's about sort of route to cash. The the sales model needs to reflect the most efficient way of achieving that for your own business. But could you just expand a bit more about?
Well, I think, what you're alluding to in the book, and this is not my research. I think it was research by PricewaterhouseCoopers, but the amount of money that companies have invested at any given point in time in working capital. Working capital is the money we need to keep the business going, and it's a huge figure. It's bigger than the economies of most nations in the world.
It's massive.
Now, not only is that a big deal, it has become a bigger deal, and the reason is because of what's happened over the last decade and a half. There was a period of time, starting with the financial crisis in 2008, really up until post-pandemic. That's about a 15-year period. Interest rates were at historically, and by historically, I mean going back to the Neolithic age, historically low levels. So the funding for working capital was at historically low levels. But in the last few years, you don't need me to tell you they've gone like this. And given, these, I think, deeply unwise policies about tariffs and trade and other things, we have inflation, they're going higher. Those trillions invested in working capital are now even harder to finance. That gets me back to, do we know our target customers? Do we know the buying? Do we know the implications for the selling cycle and time to cash? Those basics now have even bigger economic significance than they had during the decade of remarkably low interest rates. Those days are gone and are likely to be gone for some time.
Yeah. Very good. Well, can we change our focus, Frank, to performance management? Because I think the reason for switching, because to having the two topics in this order is, the sales model, if you like, is kind of setting up the model for performance, and that sort of performance management I felt was a good continuation of the conversation. But I was taken by a comment that you made, that people leave managers, not companies, and I just wonder whether you could talk about that from your experience. People leave managers, not companies.
Well, I'm borrowing that phrase. People, the phrase is people join companies but leave managers. I'm borrowing that phrase because I heard it from a number of HR executives during the decade I ran a business. And it's true. And I think it's true for a couple of reasons. The impact of your boss in business, especially in sales, is enormous. You may join a company because their product or service is cool, or they pay me really well. But when you do exit interviews, by far the most common response is, my boss. He was either a micromanager or, whatever. And this is especially true in sales. It should not surprise us, because a boss can, if the boss is doing their job, they do performance reviews, major motivational tool. They decide in sales in particular, not only on territory assignment, but very often on comp, the incentive structure, the bonus, promotion possibilities, etc. So that's one reason that's true. And the other, and this is something that about 60 years of research has consistently demonstrated. If you ask yourself what really drives adult learning, I'm not talking about undergraduates or MBA students. I'm talking about people on, once they're in the workforce. By far the biggest driver of adult learning is what those people do. In other words, their job assignments. That is about 70+% of adult learning. And again, those assignments are very often allocated by the boss. People join companies, but they
Right.
leave managers. That's why that is a truth in most organizations.
So you're suggesting that managers perhaps don't do enough to think about the task allocation in that sense to excite the employees that are reporting to them.
Well, I mean, I think some do, some don't. There's a bell curve there as there
Right.
is in
Okay.
most activities. And by
Yeah.
the way, I'm not a proponent of the point of view that says the goal of management is employee retention. Yeah, unless your hiring processes are
Yeah.
perfect, and especially in sales, most hiring processes are extraordinarily sloppy.
Yeah.
The proof of the pudding is on the job. So a certain
Yeah.
amount of turnover, I think,
Yeah.
is to be expected. But managers, again, have to do the basics. They either know how to do performance and account reviews or they
Yeah.
don't. Even if they know, they either spend time on doing that and tailoring it to the
Yeah.
individual or they don't. They're either clear about why you got this assignment and not that assignment, or they don't. All of that, I think, is what quite rightly we expect from a frontline manager, especially in sales.
Yeah.
Again, we're not optimizing for some retention figure. We are
Yeah.
optimizing for developing our people and keeping the ones who are really, really good and knowing
Yeah.
the difference between good and not good.
Yeah. Our observations, Frank, through some of the coaching programs that we run for sales leaders is that they often define coaching as sort of deal review sessions,
Right.
and so they spend a lot of time looking at pipeline and what's going to come in at the end of the month and trying to give some advice on or voice some concerns about how can we speed things up and so on. But it's really, it's coaching a deal through the system. It's not really coaching a person through the system.
Yeah. Well
And
put.
I don't know if you've got any thoughts on that from your observations of some of the. I know performance management and coaching are two related topics in your book.
Yeah. Well, I mean, first of all, let me agree with you what you said. I do think
Yeah.
this is, by far the most common situation I've seen. Most so-called sales coaching is not really coaching, development, performance conversations. It's essentially a sermon. I sit down with you and I say, Phil, sell more and get better. And you say,
Right.
wow, I never thought about that. Sell more and get better. Performance, especially in sales, much more in sales than in any other business function because sales deals with the external, right?
Yeah.
That external world that, as we've
Yeah.
said a number of times, is changing. Performance varies by individual
Yeah.
and by market conditions. And
Yeah.
part of the job of coaching for any sales manager is first, and here you do need processes, data, information, monitoring and managing that difference, and then disentangling how much is the market in performance and how much is individual skill capabilities. Think about, it's 2020, 2021, the height of the pandemic. You
Yeah.
work for Zoom in sales. You're
Yeah.
going to meet your quota even if you fall asleep. A
Yeah.
couple of years later, it's very different. Market
Yeah.
conditions. How much is that? And how much is the ability of the salesperson not to reach the right buying authority? Or
Yeah.
the salesperson who does everything right except
Yeah.
the most important thing, which is close the sale. It's the
Yeah.
sales manager's job to
Yeah.
diagnose that. And then, as you said, tailor the coaching to the individual's strengths
Yeah.
and needs, not some generic picture,
Yeah.
some platonic version of what a
Yeah.
salesperson does.
You relate performance management, or one of the components of performance management is having the right data. as well. And I love one of the anecdotes, and perhaps it was borrowed by someone else, about the story about the what was it, about the lamppost light
Well,
joke.
the drunk under the
Yeah,
lamppost.
the
Yeah.
drunk. Could you just share that, Frank? Because I
Well,
think it's so
it's
funny.
yeah. That basically it's an old joke told by statisticians, and the joke goes like this: you're walking down the street at night, and you see a man, searching for something. You stop. You say, "Can I help you? What are you looking for?" And he says, "Oh, I'm looking for my keys," and he's under a lamppost. And you say, "Well, geez, I'll help you. Where did you drop them?" And he says, "Oh, I dropped them about 2 blocks back there." And you said, "Well, why are you looking here?" And he says, "Because this is where the light is." All right. Now, it's an old statistician's joke, but the data revolution has made it more and more the
Yeah,
issue in sales. All right. We have
yeah,
all this data. We look at this data, especially in sales. Here's a simple way to think about it. Data is about the numbers. It's about the outcomes. It is about lagging indicators.
yeah,
Information knowledge is about knowing cause and effect relationships in
yeah,
your sales model. What
yeah,
drives what? Those are leading indicators. And
yeah,
again, that's part of what a sales manager's job is. Good news is we have lots of data now that we didn't
yeah,
have just a few years ago. Bad news is it's easier and easier to be the drunk under the lamppost.
yeah, yeah. I love the analogy, and I'll never forget one of our students who took on a big role in the Middle East and selling sort of big data solutions out there. And the company he worked for had no market share in this particular area, but he'd done a great job in Europe. So he was very confident, that he could go out and transform the business out in the Middle East. And when he got out there, he found that there was absolutely zero pipeline, there was zero business opportunity, and they felt that there's just no chance of selling this new, well, it wasn't new, but this new uh, data solution. And so he was starting off from ground zero with nothing. And he said, "Well, so what did I do?" And I first of all just started to ask people about, "Can you just tell me what you do? Can I, who do you see? What do you talk about? And what's the outcome?" There were just three things: who do you see? What do you talk about? What was the outcome? And he then started to build up data. And after about a month, he had quite a lot of data from the different people in the sales team. And he was able then to extract from the data, certain things. Well, we're obviously not going to sell our solution to people, that aren't in market. I can't remember what it was, but anyway, but it was very interesting because the only thing he could work on was leading indicators, because he had to create a database of leading indicators, if you like, to get to the lagging, which came later. But I mean, it really supports your story though, because the success that he had, in turning around zero sales in this particular product, led to, I think, 11 out of the 10 of them getting, 10 out of the 11 of them getting to winner's circle, I think within 2 years, which was his proudest achievement as a manager, which is great. It wasn't his success. It was the fact that so many of them got to winner's circle, but somehow
Yeah.
he managed to change the mindset to focusing on leading indicators, to the lag result later.
Well, you should, but you should also feel proud. Obviously, that student was well trained. Phil, he did the right thing, which is, hey, let me understand what's going on here. It's a little bit. There's another one of the older jokes
Yeah,
in business. You may know it. It's the joke about the company. They sell shoes. They post two of their people to these very remote countries. And after doing some of their research, the fellow in country A says, there's no there's no market here. Nobody in this country wears shoes. And the fellow in the other country says, we have an enormous opportunity in this country.
Sure.
Nobody is wearing shoes. So, the point your student was quite rightly understanding is, what's the difference? Where are the segments where there's opportunities? Where are the segments where they're not?
Yeah.
Ultimately, it's the customer who decides that, not the seller.
Yeah. No, really, really interesting. So you were a great believer, I believe, in having structured performance appraisal sessions. Because I know that it's one of those things that can be easily neglected in the pressure, to get results. You don't spend enough time doing that proper performance appraisal. So can you tell me, what's behind your thinking there, and why you feel it's so important to do?
Yeah. And by the way, I do find that this is something, the importance of doing performance reviews, performance appraisals. I find this is something that amazingly has to be argued for. Every year, and I mean every year like clockwork, you're going to find an article in Harvard Business Review or some other management journals. Oh, performance reviews. Nobody likes to do them. They're unfair. They're biased. Why don't we just scrap them? I think that is deeply, deeply misguided. People want feedback. They need feedback. And in sales in particular, so much important data about buying, what we've been talking about for the last hour, is not in the CRM system. It's lodged in the heads of those account managers. Think about that guy that was calling on Vodafone for years. When a sales manager does a sloppy, or what I call drive-by performance review, they're not only demotivating their people, they are inhibiting the flow of vital information in the company that only becomes visible, only becomes apparent and actionable when you do the good review. The second comment I'd make, this is one of those areas of management and leadership that is in fact very trainable. And you know this because you do a good job with this. So much of our talk about leadership, again, belongs, in my view, in the school of theology, not the school of management. It's let's be transformational, etc. Performance reviews are a very, very trainable skill. Company I ran, I waited almost 5 years before I brought in this wonderful, experienced HR woman to help us with this. And she was fantastic. I waited 5 years too late. So it's a very trainable skill. It's not, it's not spiritual. It's metaphysical. And unfortunately, many, many busy sales managers do drive-by reviews. Not a good thing. Not a good thing at all.
Yeah. Frank, can I just come back to the comment you made about theology? Because I found that, could you explain that to me a bit more about theology versus philosophy? I think you said.
Theology, I mean, what is theology? Taking things on faith, again, sermons, etc. And who knows? But as far as I could tell, all the best empirical evidence, Phil, says this is our one shot at life. Where unfortunately we'll all find out the real truth. And business, whatever else it is about managing in this world, not the next world. So I find a lot of what I call the semi-theological things in business, purpose, etc. I find those things generally overblown because they're easy to say and they do not require the allocation of resources. And many of the more important, impactful things, account selection, performance reviews, systematically underplayed because they take work and they do require the allocation of time, money, and effort. And I'm no longer apologetic about that. I think that the discourse in many management schools and the discourse in many companies is imbalanced. It's
Right.
it's spending too much time on what I think are ultimately sermons, and not enough on doing
Right.
good deeds, which is the heart of virtue.
Right. Yeah. God, that's so interesting. Frank, you mentioned, I can sense from the passion with which you talk about this subject, about you use words like the sales manager in particular, or sales leadership in particular. It sounds as though you feel that because they have this context with the outside world, not the inside world, that the challenges of being a great leader as a sales leader are sort of different to maybe other leaders in the business who may not have that context. Do you believe that the two disciplines of leadership are different? You know, sales, being a sales leader versus being a general manager, let's say. You know, are there particular challenges that a sales leader has that other leaders don't have that make that role particularly
Yeah.
unique?
I think it's a difference. I'm not sure if this is the right metaphor, Phil. A difference more in quantity rather than quality. And here's what I'm getting at.
Yeah.
I think most, not all, but I think most of the challenges are common to both sales managers, sales leaders, and people in other functions. But I think in sales, they're more direct for a couple of reasons. Think about what most sales managers do. They, you know, the things we've talked about in this podcast, they allocate opportunities, they affect compensation, promotion. In other words, while in any function people join companies but leave managers, in sales there are fewer buffers between the manager and the individual, right? It's much more direct because you know, because of the metrics in sales. The second thing, and this is again true in any career, in any function, but more so in sales. One of the classic transitions in any career is moving from individual contributor to manager leader. In other words, moving from someone who knows how to do their job, knows how to take care of themselves, to a manager or a leader who, by definition, must get things done through others. And in sales, that's a big issue. Most salespeople enjoy sales because of the autonomy. I make my numbers, they leave me alone. But once they become managers or leaders, it's a different game. And, you know, by far the most common complaint I hear throughout my career, this goes back over 30 years, you know, we promoted so-and-so from sales to our sales leader, was our best salesperson, continues to be a good salesperson, but doesn't manage, doesn't lead. That's a classic transition. And in sales, it's a particularly fraught one. So again, I think it's more a difference, what I'm calling quantity rather than quality. But, you know, it remains a big issue in developing your leadership in a core business activity.
Yeah. No, I 100% agree with what you've just said. I'm just checking my notes, Frank, to see if there are any questions here, because I realize that time is over the hour already. I just love maybe George decides to split this one into two. I'm not sure, but
So again, you do this well. You not only ask good questions. It's a pleasure to converse with you because we share, I think, a fair amount of experience in this core business activity. You know, I don't have more questions. I don't know if you do, but
no,
you know,
I don't. I don't. I mean, I do have, but of course, because we've only focused on a few chapters of your book, so I'm sure going to leave the door open again, Frank. Maybe at a future stage, you'll like to come back. I do one question for you, Frank. Is there another book that you're in the process of writing that we can look forward to?
Not right now, but, published the book you've been kind enough to mention
Yeah.
is my sixth book, and
Right.
unfortunately, this is the last book.
Right.
That's where I am right now, but who knows?
Who knows what will
Yeah.
Okay. Well, all I can say for those listeners who are leading in, pick up this book, Sales Management That Works. I'm just going to show it on here in case George is able to put that on one of the video clips. It's a fantastic book to read, and it's got so many practical ideas and tips, but it's written by someone who really does know the business. And it's been an absolute privilege, Frank, to have you on the podcast again. So thank you very much for joining us.
Thank you, Phil. And again, as always, a pleasure.
Yeah, for me too.